there is one other thing I wanted to talk to you about today here, Jimmy, and that is we just marked 36 years since the famous turn in Atlanta, since Ole Anderson in the cage turns on Dusty Rhodes, one of the most memorable angles of all time, and maybe the best Ole promo of all time. There are so many great ones, but the promo he cut with Gordon Soley on TBS, which is widely available on YouTube, is maybe the best promo of his career and one of the greatest of all time. Then,
and I, as a matter of fact, I used to give it out in OVW to the aspiring wrestlers in wrestling schools. This is the heel promo and a great angle all wrapped into one. Watch it and fantasize that you can someday be Ole Anderson professionally, not personally.
Exactly. Good way of putting it there. And that cage match happened in the midst of the WFIA convention in 1980. Of course, it rotated every year. It was in Memphis in 79. It was in Knoxville in 78, I believe. It moved around. And that year, I mean, perfect timing. In 79, people got to see the Freebirds,
I know the Freebirds the first time. That they came to the ring and were announced as the Freebirds, used the music in an arena and the whole 9 yards. And 78 actually was my first exposure live to Southeastern wrestling in Knoxville. And I saw people that 15 years later I would be begging to come work for me, and they did. And then in 1980, I feel like Forrest Gump. I was there for that cage match in the Omni, right? Live. Somehow it just happened that way, but luckily I was not at ringside because that night also the real main event, the match advertised as the main event, was Harley Race versus Tommy Rich for the World Championship with Lou Thez as referee. And the cage match was advertised semifinal, which they did, as I recall, took the cage up and put it down. That's maybe I'd have to go check my notebook. By the way, I still have it from that night. But basically, I was shooting pictures at ringside for all the other matches up and down the card. But because I hadn't realized that there was a cage match, and I did not bring high-speed film, and on those chain link fences in those days with camera, if you had the flash, the chain link would glow and it would be huge and out of focus. And if you didn't have a head hole to stick through, and we didn't, or I certainly didn't rank one, I don't even think the cameraman had one. So the point is, I said, well, I'll just sit that match out and watch it. And the tickets that they had gotten for us were like first section bleacher reserved tickets, not floor seats. Because I would have been trampled at ringside like a riot amongst, the goddamn running of the bulls in Pamplona. If I had been down there for that, man, I remember sitting up there just gobsmacked by the, chaos of it all and saying, thank God I'm not down at ringside without a weapon. Because the people were trying to climb the fucking cage.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the atmosphere was like, but more than that, I want you to answer that. But what was the moment like? Because, I got to think 99% of the fans in Atlanta didn't expect that to happen, if not 100%. No one expected Ole at that moment in the match just to turn on Dusty. And Ole had been a babyface for a year at that point. But the very moment it happened, how did the crowd react?
Oh, let's set it up for the people who might not know, basically, quickly as possible. Ole Anderson and Dusty Rhodes had engaged in a blood feud in Atlanta for years. And Dusty Rhodes had sworn one time, Ole Anderson, it will never be over. And then while Dusty was away from the territory, Ole had somehow, through some reasoning, been attacked by some heels or whatever and switched babyface. And Stan Hansen was there to help him. But he took partners like Mr. Wrestling 2 that you never thought that he'd team with. And he teamed up with Tommy Rich, and you never thought, and they were popular teams. This lasted for going on past a year and a half, going on 2 years. That he was teaming with baby faces and that he was fighting heels and that he hadn't turned on anybody and he was cutting babyface promos. And finally, the one person that he had never teamed up with, Dusty Rhodes, they do the deal with the Assassins, fuck Ole around some kind of way. The Assassins were Jody Hamilton and I think Roger Smith at that point.
I think so, yes.
Who was a guest on The Experience not long ago. And anyway, so it's Ole and Dusty for the first time because Dusty is, mortal enemies with the Assassins and Assassin number one. And they have a match and it's fine. And it goes, the baby faces don't win, but everything's fine with Ole and Dusty. And then they come back a couple weeks later and they have a rematch and everything's fine with Ole and Dusty. And then finally they come back inside a steel cage Ole Anderson and Dusty Rhodes against the Assassins, 2 referees. On the Assassin side, the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff. And taking up for Ole and Dusty's side, Gene Anderson, Ole's brother, who has not been in Atlanta in the past year and a half. And they have the match. Dusty starts, shines against the Assassins. Then one of them cuts him off, both of them cut him off, whatever, and they get some heat on him. And then the referees are, they're not really favoring anybody because there was, they do a little spot for each guy, but the referees are there to cancel each other out. And finally, Dusty sells and he's bleeding. And finally he gets away from the Assassins and he makes the tag to Ole. And Ole jumps into the ring and rubs his fists together and looks to the Assassins and Dusty is slumped in the corner. And Ole turns around and starts putting the boots to Dusty Rhodes. And when he did that, the people went from the pop of finally Dusty got the tag, and here comes Ole, to, wait a minute, he's looking at Dusty, to, you motherfucker! You no good motherfucker! And once it registered on him, then the shit starts flying through the fucking air because it took a second for everybody in the building to realize what was going on. And then they drag Dusty out of the ring, and Gene starts putting the boots to him. And Koloff starts putting in both the Assassins, and it's Dusty against 5 of the most evil heels that have ever walked the face of the earth. And shit starts flying some more, and here comes some of the baby faces. But they can't get in the cage. And first it was referees and it was ring attendants and the baby faces. Then you see fans crowding all around the ring. And I mean, this happens fairly quickly. And then there's some in the tape you watch, which is only a hard camera, one angle from the bleachers. So it's a full ring shot. Some of the people you see climbing up and that got farther toward the top and looked a little more athletic doing it. They were the fucking boys, right? Some of the baby faces but some of the people that just got a climb or two and didn't really look too fucking slick at it were fucking fans. And the heels are beating the cage with the championship belts and with their boots or whatever the fuck they had as gimmicks to break the people's grip, both the fans and the wrestlers. And then finally the cage door, somebody, gets the bolt cutters, and here comes Lars Anderson, the other Anderson brother who's trying to protect Dusty. And they get on him too. And then a few more of the babyface come in and they get Dusty drug out. And as I recall, it took about a half an hour to get the heels out of the ring and get it out of the can, and get them safely out of there without people fucking murdering them.
Man.
But it was very effective. And then, of course, the following week on TV, Ole comes out and cuts the promo that you talked about. And they showed the clip. And he explained everything, that for years he had waited for this opportunity. From Dusty's own words, it would never be over. But then he agreed to Wrestling 2. He teamed up with him. And Tommy Rich, he teamed up with him. And the asides hated every minute of it. And he said Gene was gone because he couldn't even be here and see me associating with these sniveling peasants and blah, blah, blah. And then finally, and no, they hadn't fucked Ole around the assassin. They fucked Dusty around. They fucked Dusty around in the angle. And he asked Ole because he said he never spoke to Dusty Rhodes, but he made up with the other ones. And the other ones talked to Dusty and said, hey, Ole, isn't that bad? And then finally, I didn't have to ask Dusty Rhodes to be my partner. Dusty asked me. And then he got one match and then 2 matches. And then he said, how about a cage, Dusty? We can fix those assassins in the cage. And the idiot went for it. And that's how he got him in the cage. He explained the whole thing and how the setup. And then he brought Gene back and that even Koloff and the assassins knew nothing of the plan. That's why they were so shocked. And it was fucking perfect. And then Dusty brought Andre. Andre the Giant will be my partner in the Omni against Ole and Gene Anderson. The hottest heel team in the history of one of them, along with the Assassins, in the history of the territory in the Carolinas and the South, against Dusty Rhodes and Andre the Giant. They ran 2 or 3 weeks at the Omni with that and drew fucking 14,000 people a show. It was a classic example of this is how you fucking draw money with pro wrestling.
One last question about that night, Jimmy. So after the cage match, you still have the NWA Championship match, Harley Race versus Tommy Rich. Were you back at ringside?
I was back at, I want to say I remember it, and some, statistician out there is going to call me demonstrably a liar, but I remember that they took that cage down and had that title match, but maybe I'm just insane. But I remember it that way, but I think they might have done that to keep the people in the arena and not riot further, and also to get the heels out the back, because think about this. If it's the last match and you begin to have a riot, there's one thing everybody knows. They might go to jail. They might get the fuck beat out of them, but they're not going to get kicked out and miss any matches. And that's why the last match of the night was always one if you were going to have a riot, unless you were really fucking good. That's the one you added in, because you couldn't kick them out and make them miss any matches. They didn't mind going to jail, especially if they get the fucking shot at you, but they didn't want to miss any matches.